Hey, everybody, welcome back to Retro Wrestling with Gene Jackson. I'm your host, Gene Jackson. And, I tried when I did the first episode of MCW Revisited, I wanted to try something new and just do an audio version. And a lot of you reached out and said, hey, man, I like the video version better. And while, there's not going to be a lot to the video version, it's just going to be me sitting here reading my notes. I did pull a couple of clips from this one, and I figured, you know what? It will be good to be able to throw some clips in here to talk about. So, yeah, we're going to do a video version of the show instead, which I mean, the audio version is still going to be out there on Spotify and different, places that you can get it. But here on YouTube and everywhere, we'll have this video version. So, hopefully, everybody likes it. I got nothing but good feedback from the first episode. Thank you to everybody who checked it out. And hope they get better as they go along. Because again, this is the first time that I'm trying this, doing a review by myself thing here, and most everybody had positive feedback, and I felt it went pretty well. It'll take a couple of these to find my footing and get into a groove, so to speak. But we're going to work at it because, like I said, it's easier for me to do these because it takes away the challenge of trying to schedule with a co-host or a guest or whatever the case may be for any particular episode. And I'm enjoying watching these MCW shows, so we're going to put these out as frequently as we can. I still have some interviews coming up and some reviews of other things we're going to be doing, but I'm going to go ahead and put this one out as episode number 21. And so this show that we're going to review today, being the February 5th, 2000, the second episode of Memphis Championship Wrestling. This show is just sort of strung together from what was basically one match from that ill-fated first set of TV tapings at Samstown and Tunica because of the snowstorm that, caused the majority of the wrestlers, including Jerry Lawler and Brian Christopher and the Cat and different people, to not be able to be at those tapings. So this match has got one match from those tapings. It's got some pre-tapes from those tapings. And then we fill in the rest with some matches from some random WWF tapings. So we're going to cover this show because it happened, but just fair warning, don't judge the whole series, be it this podcast or MCW in general, from this particular episode. Things start to pick up on the next one, on episode 3, as it's from a TV taping where everyone was able to be there and they're able to start getting some angles going and different things. But on this set of tapings here, or this particular episode, I guess I should say, like I said, we're going to have one match from the tapings. We're going to have some WWF matches, along with some promos and pre-tapes with Superstar Bill Dundee and Van Harden, who are campaigning to be the MCW commissioner. And to be fair, I'm not going to spend a lot of time during this review on this show, like I said, because it's kind of just filler to get us to the next TV taping. So let's take a look at how this show opened. I thought this was interesting. The show opens this week with a pre-recorded promo with the man who at the time was the current World Wrestling Federation champion, and he's speaking about his strange relationship with Jerry Lawler. And of course, I'm talking about the WWF champion Triple H, because at the time in the WWF, Lawler was a heel announcer, and he put over Triple H and DX and those guys that were all heel. But down here in Memphis, it's a little bit different story. So let's take a listen to what the game has to say about the King when we're on MCW television.
You know something, Kingfish? Every week, Monday night, Thursday night, Raw, SmackDown, you go out there with JR, Michael Cole, whoever it is, you put me over like $1 million. You say great things about me, you say great things about Stephanie, you say great things about DX. You're our good buddy, right? Well, that's all well and good, but then I come down to the Pyramid, I come down to Memphis in a big match with The Rock, and you want to be a big shot in your hometown. You want to be buddies with The Rock. You want to steal my thunder. You want to make the big impression. You want to get over with the people. Well, King, you just remember this. You want to be The Rock's friend? Well, I've got friends too. And I've got plenty of friends in Memphis. So if I was you, King, I'd just keep looking behind you and watch your back.
All right, so there we have a word from Triple H, and I like that we're not just totally ignoring it here, because I mean, in some ways, that might be the easier thing to do, is to just act like these guys are enemies and not address what happens on WWF TV. And they did some of that in the old USWA days, but that's kind of hard to do here because more people saw the WWF than saw MCW. So most of the time, if they're aware of Triple H and the King and everything, they're going to be aware of the dynamic that they have in the WWF, as well as the one we're trying to parlay here in MCW. So I thought it was good that Triple H addresses this and Jerry Lawler addresses this a little bit later in this show, and we're going to take a listen to that because I thought it was very interesting, because Lawler's kayfabe explanation, if you will, kind of sets the table for how things are going to be handled with him here at MCW. But we go straight from that into the show intro, and out of that, we go right into a backstage segment with Bill Dundee and Van Harden debating why each of them feel they should be the commissioner of MCW. Now, I don't plan to do a lot of clips on this show, but I feel like we need to show this one to kind of establish what this angle is. And they have clips throughout this entire show, and I'm not going to cover each and every one of them. But here's a clip of how they started the show to kind of give you an idea of where things are going with this Bill Dundee and Van Harden campaigning for commissioner angle, if you will.
All right, listen, Bill. I drove all the way up here from Memphis just to see you and talk to you about this commissioner thing. I know you want to be commissioner. I want to be commissioner, and I should be the commissioner.
All right, that's your opinion. Now, just let me give you my opinion. Everybody, I just believe that if you've never participated in the sport, if you've never played football, you shouldn't be a referee, you shouldn't be. And they have them. I'm not saying, and some of them make bad decisions. So I'm not saying that you would make bad decisions, but you never wrestled, and you shouldn't be the commissioner. Yours truly should be, and that's just how I feel.
Yeah, well, that may be, but Bill, hey, I'm a businessman, a successful businessman. I went to college, I've been in the military, I know how to lead people, I know what to do to make MCW the top-ranked wrestling in the country.
What was the name of the other company you led?
KAW.
Okay, where is it?
It's gone, disbanded.
That's
It's
right,
gone.
because you made a lot of bad decisions, brother, and I'm telling you, I saw the show, and you made a lot of bad decisions. A lot of stuff happened on that Saturday morning television, Saturday night TV. It doesn't matter. Kids watch it. Shouldn't be happening, and you let it set fire to tables, people jumping on things, hitting. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't get rough in wrestling. I'm not saying that at all. But you let it happen, brother.
Well, maybe there were some bad decisions, but hey, I told them I was going to straighten it out, and I did. And now it's MCW.
Well, let me ask you this, brother. This is America. You do everything in a democratic way. If we get all the guys to vote in the dressing rooms, call them up on the phone, don't matter. If they vote for me, will you accept that? If they vote for you, I'll accept it. Will you accept it?
Okay, I'll do that. But I tell you, it's going to be me as the commissioner.
Okay, so there we go. We've established what's happening here. All the guys in MCW, and as you'll see with some of these other clips, if you watch the episode, and I highly suggest you do, they're going to allow the wrestlers of MCW to vote on who the commissioner should be. So both these guys are going to be throughout the rest of the show. Like I say, if you want to go watch this episode here on the YouTube channel, Retro Wrestling Archive, they are calling up different wrestlers from the MCW roster and from the WWF roster, trying to make a case for themselves for being the commissioner of MCW. And I don't know, I like it. I think it's a good way to utilize Bill Dundee behind the scenes here. And of course, he'll be in front of the camera in the ring as well. So we'll get to that. But right after that clip, we then go into the opening of the show. We have David Webb and David Jett, our hosts. Jett puts over the Triple H promo along with the KEW guys, Bull Payne and Todd Morton, along with Alcoholic, and then David Webb pitches it to the King, Jerry Lawler. And again, I'm not going to do a ton of clips on this show, especially not this particular episode, but I do think this promo from Lawler, like I mentioned earlier, is important because bear in mind, through the entire run of MCW, as he tries to create a kayfabe explanation on being a heel on WWF TV and putting over a lot of the guys that he then feuds with as a babyface here in Memphis, that requires a little bit of explanation on his part, but who better than the King to be able to spin it and make it all make sense? Let's hear from the King right now.
Thanks, guys. Certainly great to be back here on Memphis Wrestling. And it was great last week to see my old pal Banana Nose, Lance Russell, back on the show, and he'll be here again later on today. This week, I understand Lance is digging way down deep into those archives that he's so fond of, and he has promised to show his all-time favorite clip from the past. And, well, I'm not even going to tell you what it is. I'll wait and let you see. But it's Lance's favorite, and it's possibly my favorite, too. It's going to be very, very interesting. That's going to be coming up a little bit later on in the show. And, yes, I did hear the comments from Triple H a little earlier. Triple H, you got to understand one thing. Yes, there are two kings. And I'm not talking about me and Elvis. I'm talking about two me's. There's the me that sits out on WWF shows like Raw and SmackDown and talks about wrestlers like yourself. And sometimes I talk good, sometimes I talk bad. And then there's the other king that gets in the ring here in Memphis and in other parts of the country. And you got to understand that that's the king that takes care of business the way the Memphis people like to see it taken care of. So, Triple H, you're just going to have to understand that. Now, speaking of taking care of business right here in Memphis, let me talk for just a second about Bull Payne, Todd Morton, and this Alki guy. These rejects, or maybe I better call them these holdovers from KAW. The guys that have the skull so thick that it can't seem to get through their heads that KAW is dead. It's gone. It's history. It's in the past. It's Memphis wrestling now. And obviously, you guys that's not setting too well with you guys. Well, I'll tell you what, this Wednesday night, down at Sam's Town Casino, the king will be there. And I understand if you guys are planning to show up, let me just tell you something. You got a rude awakening in store for you. I'll get it through your thick skulls that this is Memphis wrestling, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about by Memphis wrestling.
So there you have the explanation from the king that, he's saying, Triple H, you just got to get it through your head. There are two kings. There's the king that's on Raw and does the commentary and roots for the bad guys. And then there's the king here in Memphis, who's the good guy and takes up for everybody. And I like that because, he lays it out to the viewer that he's putting this in perspective for Triple H. But really, he's telling you, the viewer of MCW, that back in 2000, that, hey, you're just going to have to learn there's two different kings. There's the guy you see on Monday night, and then there's the guy you're going to see on Saturday mornings here on UPN, and that's the way it's going to be. So I thought he handled it well. So next up, they took a commercial break, and when we return from the commercial, we get a segment where Van Harden is talking to Alkiholic on the phone. Alki ends up hanging up on him. Of course, Van Harden's been trying to run the KEW guys out of here since the first episode. So obviously, Alki is not going to be on board to vote for Van Harden. But then again, he's not exactly driving with Bill Dundee either. So be interested to see where the KEW guys fall. But then again, technically, from a kayfabe perspective, if we believe what we're seeing on the show, the KEW guys don't actually work for MCW. They're invading. They're trying to bully their way in. So why would they get a vote? I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. But like I said, these segments go back and forth with Van Harden and Bill Dundee throughout the entire show, with us only hearing their half of the phone conversation, Bob Newhart style from back in the day with various people, and they identify them, and none of the calls seem to go well. So I'm not going to recap them all. Like I said, check out the episodes. Some of them are pretty fun. They're worth your while to go watch the episode on the YouTube channel. So next up, we go to our one and only actual MCW match this week from the tapings, and that is match number 1, K-Crush, or as you may have come to know him since, R-Truth, Ron Killings, taking on the Yellow Jacket. And I suppose of them being short on matches, the Yellow Jacket gets a lot more offense than any of us are used to seeing on Memphis television over the years. From USWA and throughout the years on Memphis TV, the Yellow Jacket didn't usually get a lot of offense, but he actually looked pretty good here against K-Crush because I guess they needed to put some time in. But as the match is going on, the Davids, Jet, and Webb are on commentary, and they explain the situation that the MCW wrestlers are going to get to vote on who will be the commissioner. Therefore, that's why Harden and Dundee are calling and campaigning for the wrestlers' votes. David Jet wonders if he'll be allowed to vote, which David Webb replies, typically convicted felons aren't allowed to vote, so that would knock you out of it, which, it's fun. The guys are having some fun on commentary while putting over the commissioner angle. And so there's not a lot to talk about in the ring because obviously we're not, there's not going to be a a storyline or any kind of angle here with Ron Killings and Kevin Lawler, or I should say the Yellow Jacket, because there's not a storyline to put over, but they're just having a match here, and it's and for a match, just for the sake of a match, it's not a bad match at all. It allows K Crush to showcase his moveset. You get an idea of what he's going to be all about here in MCW. And the Yellow Jacket looks good in the process. And he's, somebody they can always have in their back pocket to put in the ring, TV tapings, house shows, whatever they need him for. So whenever you see announcer Kevin Christian, doing interviews in the back, you're subject to perhaps the Yellow Jacket later on. But K Crush manages to put him away after his big leg lariat move, if you will. And next up, we get a plug for the next Tunica show from Grandmaster Sexay, Brian Christopher, who at this point, he's full-time in the WWF is Too Cool with Scotty 2 Hotty and Rikishi. They're riding high up there. That gimmick's getting over like crazy. If you're a younger person, if you weren't watching in 2000, you can go back and you can watch, Raw and, Peacock and see the pay-per-views from the era. But it's really hard to really appreciate just how over they got with that gimmick up there if you weren't there at the time. But man, the dancing, especially the worm from Scotty 2 Hotty and just Rikishi in general, was super, super over. Too Cool was a big deal up there. And so having them back here in Memphis, it is pretty cool. So Brian invites all his friends from Memphis out to Tunica, and then he brings in his friend Joe C., best known as being the pint-sized sidekick of Kid Rock at the time, and they close out the promo. And you're going to see a lot of just strange characters popping up here in MCW from time to time. It's kind of fun just to see, people that unexpectedly show up for things like this. So there you see him, Joe C., alongside Grandmaster Sexay there for a promo for Tunica. So match number 2, and this is from a WWF Monday Night Raw taping. Of course, we're in February by now in MCW time in 2000, but clearly this was shot sometime in December, because if you watch the episode, down in the corner, the little WWF logo has like a Christmas wreath around it. So this match is probably a few weeks old, but it's Jim the Anvil Neidhart taking on Nick Barbary. The announcers promote that the Anvil will be at the Sam's Town TV tapings coming up this week in Tunica, that is. Of course, we know that the Anvil, as we heard about from the Observer last week, will also be a trainer for MCW, and that's going to be part of his assignment as well from the WWF to come down to Memphis as part of the developmental program, being the veteran, and help develop these guys, help do training, and work in the ring as part of the show. So this match is just a straight-up squash match. Neidhart beats on Barbary for a couple of minutes before putting him away. Nothing much to see here. No reason to go back and go out of your way to see that match. If you've seen one Jim the Anvil Neidhart squash in your life, you've seen this one. So anyway, let's take a quick podcast commercial break here. And when we return, we'll hear what the MCW Slam of the Week was.
We'll return after these messages.
Jackson, Tennessee, get ready for a night of non-stop laughs at Cody's Sports Bar and Grill. On May 10th at 7 p.m., we're bringing some of the best comedians in the area to the stage. Tickets are $10 at the door, but why pay more? Grab yours in advance for just $7 at codyscomedy.eventbrite.com. Great food, cold drinks, top-tier comedy. What more could you ask for? This event is 18 and over, so make sure you bring your ID and your best sense of humor. Comedy at Cody's Sports Bar and Grill, May 10th, 7 p.m. in Jackson, Tennessee. Be there.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to uswapodcast.com.
All right, so the MCW Slam of the Week brought to you by Dennis Hall's Auto Salvage. which featured a replay of last week's match between Bill Dundee and Todd Morton as Bull Payne and Gangsta B.I.G. got involved. And, as they've said for years on the USWA shows, for the best parts in town, come on down. That's right, to Dennis Hall's Auto Salvage. So I guess we'll be seeing more slams of the week from Dennis Hall's Auto Salvage. We look forward to those. So from there, we got some more on-camera plugging from the Davids, both Jet and Webb. David Jet pitches to a highlight video of Bull Payne. And David Webb tries to head it off, but there's no MCW commissioner to plead his case to. So the highlight video airs. So I kind of like that because in theory, at the time, from a kayfabe perspective, if you're one of these people that are a real stickler for, following along with the storyline and everything, Bull Payne is not part of MCW. He's a KEW guy who's trying to, like I said earlier, bully his way in. But he has an in with David Jet. Obviously, David Jet favors KEW. He was the voice of KEW, like we talked about last week. He was the Joey Styles of KEW, if you will. So we explain away the reason Bull Payne has a highlight video being shown is because David Jet's making it happen and there's no commissioner here to stop it. So I like that. I like when we address things that ordinarily for, the fans who really pay attention would be eye rolling for them. Nope, we got an explanation. So I like that kind of thing. Following that, we head into a classic Memphis wrestling segment hosted by Lance Russell. And this week's match is the famous Tupelo concession stand brawl between the Blonde Bombers, Larry Latham and Wayne Ferris. Of course, those guys being the future Moondog Spot and the Honky Tonk Man, going against Superstar Bill Dundee and Jerry the King Lawler. So that match is shown, or that, I guess not match, but the end of their tag team match going into the concession stand brawl is pretty much shown in its entirety here. So if you've never seen that, if you're one of these fans that you've heard about it forever, you've heard mention of it, it's here. So go check it out. It's definitely something, if you've never seen it, it's definitely worth a watch, and is definitely the precursor to hardcore wrestling and extreme wrestling that, had took a hold in the 90s with ECW, and then here in Memphis with KEW and all the wild stuff we saw in the USWA and the CWA over the years. So if you haven't seen it, check it out. And of course, the fact it's hosted by Lance just makes it even better. So next up on the MCW show, match number 3 is a chocolate pudding match with the Cat taking on Tori. So this is essentially just a women's mud wrestling match like you'd see at a bar, but instead of mud, we're wrestling in chocolate pudding instead, or at least that's what they're telling us it is. I can only assume it actually was. This appeared to be from a SmackDown episode. I don't remember whether this actually aired on SmackDown or if this was just done at a SmackDown taping or what the circumstances were. But Stacy got the win when X-Pac in a snorkel and wetsuit interfered. Of course, he was in the middle of an angle with Tori at the time. Afterwards, Kane appeared and tossed Kane appeared and tossed X-Pac face first into the chocolate pudding. And then the Cat shoved ring announcer Lillian Garcia into the pudding for good measure as well. As this, my friends, is a sample of the WWF in 2000. And this is, hey, I'm all for, hot chicks wrestling in mud and pudding and all this stuff, but just, I don't know. WWF in 2000, not my favorite era of the WWF. I know there's a lot of younger people that have a lot of love for it. It's their old school. It's what they remember, and that's great. I don't knock anybody for that. But as far as eras of WWF goes, just not my favorite. But anyway, again, if you weren't there for it, you're not, you didn't experience it in real time, and you're checking out shows like this to kind of get a feel for what was going on in wrestling in 2000. That's what was going on in the WWF. So match number 4 is our main event. Again, this is from a WWF taping. Too Cool, Grandmaster Sexay, and Scotty 2 Hotty that we talked about earlier. It's taking on Kai and Tai, which is Taka Michinoku and Sho Funaki. And so, again, like I say, this is from a WWF TV taping. This one goes about 6 minutes. It's a good little TV match from 2 underrated tag teams of the era. At this time in the WWF, one thing you can say for them is they did have a very loaded tag team division, a lot of talented teams. This is around the time that you had the Dudleys, the Hardys, Edge and Christian, the APA, just a wealth of great tag teams at the time. And so a lot of times, teams like Too Cool and Kai and Tai kind of, would somewhat get lost in the shuffle at different times. And like I said, Too Cool was super, super over. And they've fought their way out of that, being pigeonholed kind of at the bottom of the card with guys like Kai and Tai, and ended up moving up the card and had a run with the tag team titles. And like I said, made themselves into a big time group, I guess you would say, because they weren't just a tag team with Rikishi involved. So Too Cool finishes them off with their patented Worm, followed by the Tennessee Jam that was super over at the time. Again, if you weren't watching wrestling at the time, you really just cannot fathom and appreciate just how over Scotty 2 Hotty doing the Worm really was. It was a phenomenon. So our MCW episode closes with a big win for Too Cool. Like I say, moving forward, when we get into more of the MCW shows from, actual matches from MCW, and we start establishing some storylines and different things, we'll spend more time on each show. We'll show a little more clips and different things. But this show, again, is really just kind of filler just to get us to that next TV taping. But of course, we were going head to head here. Memphis Championship Wrestling on UPN 30 was going head to head with Memphis Power Pro Wrestling over on TV5. So let's go to the Observer. Let's hear some results of what happened over on Power Pro in competition with this episode. So on the February 5th edition of Memphis Power Pro TV, opening match saw Tracy Smothers beat Scotty Sabre. 7 beat JD Hall. A lumberjack match. Now get this, on television, a lumberjack match where Randy Hales defeated Jim Cornette. 2 Falk for sure, which is the legend. Tony Falk defeated Alan Steele, all that Alan Steele, if you will, good buddy of mine. And in the main event, Ali won a battle royal to win the Power Pro Wrestling Heavyweight title. Of course, Ali was Steve Sharp. He was also originally called Ali Stevens. He had been the Atomic Dog across a lot of the indies throughout the Southeast. Big guy. He was, I don't know, it was an odd look for him. Like, they called him Ali, and he had like Sabu, like pants that looked like what Sabu wore. Big guy that I thought, was probably going to make it beyond Power Pro. He did get a WCW contract, but it was right at the tail end of WCW. And, it before he really could do anything with it, WCW went away. And at that point, when WWF bought out WCW, there were so many people under contract. And now with just the one game in town, you couldn't utilize all these folks. So a lot of folks who were really talented, guys like Steve Sharp and a number of others, kind of, fell by the wayside just because, there's only so many, hours of television they could book each week. There's only so many house shows. There's only so many ways you could utilize these guys. And that's unfortunate. But Steve Sharp, Ali went on to have a career in acting. And he's done well for himself. So don't feel too bad for Ali. He's probably a better life being an actor than getting there and taking those bumps. But so the Observer says they did a Jim Cornette versus Randy Hale match with all the heels as lumberjacks, but Hales pinned Cornette after a bulldog headlock, which got to go back and watch that. I can only imagine Randy Hales doing a bulldog. That had to be amazing. Then it said, and Tracy Smothers, the new lead heel, hit Hales with a chair after the match. So Randy Hales executes a running bulldog on Jim Cornette, gets the win, only to get cracked in the head by Tracy Smothers, who's now the new lead heel, because as we talked about last week, the WWE has pulled their developmental contract. They're pulling out all the OVW guys. They pulled out all the WWF developmental guys. And so now, Randy Hales is scrambling to get local talent and a lot of the old Memphis crew back together to get them in there to keep this show going. So It says the highlight of the February 5th Battle Royal, or excuse me, the highlight of the February 5th Battle of Memphis Television, referring to the battle between Power Pro and MCW, saw them shoot at least a TV angle between Triple H and Jerry Lawler. Triple H did an interview explaining about Lawler attacking him at the December 30th house show at Memphis. Lawler, who wasn't there, this was the second show taped on 126 when Lawler couldn't be there because SmackDown tapings were moved one day back, did a taped interview and said there were two different kings, the one in the WWF and the one in Memphis, who took care of business in the ring. They were doing an angle where Bill Dundee and Van Harden were both running for commissioner, and the wrestlers would vote to see who would become commissioner. Dundee said that everything at his strip club he ran would be on the house if a wrestler voted for him. Not a bad way to try to win. Dundee had a phone conversation with Lawler, who hung up on him. They aired a 1979 Tupelo concession stand brawl, which at the time, this was a wrestling classic, with Lawler and Dundee versus Wayne Ferris and Larry Latham. On Power Pro Wrestling, they acted as if the promotion was in chaos after all that angle had done. This is like a note from Dave in parentheses. It says, on Power Pro, they act as if the promotion was in chaos. And then in parentheses, he says, because after all, that angle has done wonders for WCW's buy rates and TV ratings recently. Not much of note on this week's show. So that was Dave Meltzer's take on this week's Battle of the Memphis television shows. That's my quick review of the second episode of MCW. Again, not a lot to this when they did the best they could because, again, the most of the wrestlers who were booked that night were not able to be there because of the snowstorm. So next week, episode 3, or I'll say, as the show goes next week, I don't know that we'll have a podcast out next week. I'm going to do my very best. But when we review episode 3, that's our first full-on taping where all the wrestlers who were booked to be there are there. And we start developing some storylines and MCW starts to come together. So looking forward to that. We'll be reviewing that very soon in episode 3 of MCW Revisited. But as far as the next episode of Retro Wrestling, I'm working on getting together, like I mentioned before, some of these interviews that I had in the works prior to going on hiatus. And I guess I can talk about now. It's come out. The reason this show went on hiatus is because I was working on a book about Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert along with Doug Gilbert. And we got the book completed. It's out now, available for pre-order. You can go to tinyurl.com/Eddie Gilbert book, and you can order it now and have it in your hands by May the 15th. It's only $24.99. Shipping is included in that price. So get it now over at tinyurl.com/Eddie Gilbert book. Like I said, that is why this show went on hiatus, as I had all these other things going on. Plus, me and Doug had a pretty wild deadline to hit. The publisher wanted to get this book out by the end of April because of the Vice episode, the Dark Side of the Ring episode coming up about Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. They wanted to get this book out in the same proximity of that. And we actually come in ahead of schedule. I was shocked when Doug first called me and told me what they wanted the deadline to be. I was like, there's no way. But we made it happen. I had a lot of stuff already prepared from when I worked on this Eddie Gilbert book years ago. Doug had been, compiling things for years, and we finally sat down and made it happen. And I'm glad we did. I'm really proud of it. It's something I've wanted to do. Like I say, I started that project 15 years ago, but at the time, me and Doug weren't able to get together on it, and I just didn't feel comfortable putting it out. I knew a lot of Eddie's story, but there was a lot of things I didn't know, and so I didn't want to put it out not being the full story. And so now Doug was able to be involved and fill in all the holes and tell about things that only he knows about Eddie. I'm really proud of it now. I'm really glad that I didn't do it alone back, in 2009, I guess it was, when I was working on that. So, again, It's available now for pre-order. It'll be out May the 15th. I hope everybody reads it. I hope everybody enjoys it. If you're a fan of Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, I really think you'll like it because, again, this is Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert from the perspective of his brother, Doug Gilbert, who knew him better, right? So I'm proud to have been involved in it. I'm, happy to be able to do a podcast with Doug, work on this book with Doug and Tommy Rich, and get to learn. I've always been a big fan of the Gilberts. I was always a fan of Eddie. I was a fan of Doug and Tommy, Tommy Gilbert, as well as Tommy Rich. So getting to hang out with these guys and learn even more about people that I've followed their entire careers has been a really cool experience. And then now having a way to share it with everyone else via podcast, and now this book about Eddie that'll be around forever, right? Books will be here long after we're all gone. So it's just really cool, and I'm happy. We didn't want to talk about it until it was ready, and we got it finished and was ready to go. So I had to kind of be evasive about this project I'm working on, and I'm putting this show on hiatus and everything. So it's cool to be able to talk about it now. And again, it's Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, the uncrowned king of professional wrestling, and it's available now for pre-order over at tinyurl.com/Eddie Gilbert book. And don't forget, check out if you're watching Memphis, here, check out uswapodcast.com for all the links related to my retro wrestling review USWA podcast that I do alongside Richard Mullican and Josh Briley of P3 Radio. And when one of them's not available, I'm also joined by my buddy Brian Trammell of stspod.club. And we go back and review USWA wrestling right now. We are in October of 1993, and we're going to get through the year. And originally we were just going to roll from 93 into 94. But I think me and the guys have decided that when we finish 93, we are going to go back and start reviewing week by week the year 1991 in USWA. I haven't presented that to all the listeners yet. We may put it up for a vote and make sure everybody's cool with that. But I hope they are, because 1991 was a fun year. We chose to start with 1993 because of all the WWF stuff going on and Vince turning heel, being in Memphis as a heel for the first time. And I just felt like it was a good hook to get people to give us a shot. And now that we've, earned some listeners and some loyal fans of the show, I feel like, we can take it back to 91 and hopefully people will go with us. So that's the plan anyway. We may have to change it if people aren't on board with it. As far as the Dangerous Conversations, it's kind of in limbo right now. Like it's not gone. Okay. It's coming back, but it's moving. It moved from WrestleCopia to another format, and it's taking longer to move than we thought it would. This was all supposed to transpire in like a couple of weeks' time, but it's taking longer than that. But I promise Dangerous Conversations is not dead. It's coming back bigger and better, and you can keep up with it at DougGilbertPodcast.com. You can find links to all the things related not only to the show, but to Doug and Tommy, all their social media and everything. You can keep up with it all right there at DougGilbertPodcast.com. And before I go, I want to remind everybody, please check out all the great podcasts my good friend Ray Russell puts out over there at WrestleCopia.com. I'm proud that the USWA podcast is a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, and Ray puts out some really top shelf quality content over there. And do yourself a favor, if you're a wrestling fan, especially of old school wrestling, vintage wrestling, if you will, WrestleCopia has got something literally for everyone. Check it out. You'll be glad you did. And that's all for this week. So check back soon for another episode of Retro Wrestling with Gene Jackson.